Thank you. Got it to work. All right, so we're recording. So, have any of you guys used Rhino before on classes? Okay, so this is going to be a pretty basic interface, but what we're doing is we'll have our quad screen. It's usually set up by our top perspective, front and right. It follows a lot of the basic 3D modeling. So your Cartesian grid, those who've modeled in SketchUp or AutoCAD should be pretty familiar with this. Has anyone never 3D modeled anything before? Okay. So the way this works is it's all based on a simple grid of the X, Y, and Z. So on the top view, you'll have your Y as the up and your X as the left and right. And when you're at your perspective view, the X and Y are remain the same, but you have a Z direction, which is up and down.
I mean, I never 3D printed before. I've 3D modeled before in previous class.
Okay, great. So then we'll that's good because that's great because we'll all jump into the 3D printing basics in the following classes. So that's good. So a lot of the basics for Rhino. You have your viewports. If you like, it's the same rules as basic modeling. You point, 2 points define a line defines an edge, a couple lines. If you have 3 lines, that creates a B-rep. A lot of the simple things like that. So to get a simple box, we'll grab the rectangle, and actually if you hold and drag the rectangle, it gives you 4 options how to draw a rectangle. But we'll just use a simple corner to corner rectangle. So we also have grid snaps as well that can help us 3D model. So like say if we wanted to snap some of these grid points, we can turn on our grid snaps. And that we can start to, planar grid snaps. So that can help us snap to the grid as well. We also have other snaps that if we want to highlight an endpoint or a point or a midpoint of a line or a center of a rectangle, all these are different options that can help us navigate these models and edit them. So for drawing that rectangle, we can just click, or we can actually list specific dimensions. So if we want a 3 foot by 5 foot rectangle, there it is. We can also highlight that, and when we highlight it, we notice that these rectangles are dictated by 4 points. So we can actually start to move these points as well. That can deform the rectangle. We can also start to extrude this by typing in extrude. And again, it's going to ask for a specific dimension, and we can say 5 feet if we need to. It should bring us to 5 feet. Now, right now, it's just showing a simple wireframe, but we can change, or actually, we can change the display of this. So maybe it's wireframe now, but if we highlight this and right-click it, it can switch to a shade view. We can turn off lines. Right click it, can turn on all of them. And we can also close off this box by just saying a simple command cap. So it's it is really similar to SketchUp. And it's like I like to say it's like SketchUp and AutoCAD. If they mixed, this would be that. If we need, let's say if we don't want to cap this, you know, if we don't want the top, or we don't want the bottom, we just want the top, we could also create a surface, and so we can hover over here and do a 3 or 4 point surface, and that's just dictated by 4 points. So we can have something like this, and there's our surface. And we can and by highlighting over it, we can just join it, and now we have this box that that has a lid but is empty at the bottom. And if we want to redo that, we can type in explode, and it explodes the faces. If you have a mouse, you can also hit that center wheel, and it brings up some hotkeys as well. So if we have this, we're actually going to delete this. We're going to join. We're going to cap. Let's get those back. We can also use Gumball as well. Gumball is more of a, it actually works really well it reminds me a lot of SketchUp or the conceptual mass in CAD or in Revit. So if we did 2 inch by 6 inch, we have our line that's on the 0 grid. Rotate that around. Now, sometimes if you want just a straight thing, a straight line, there's a command called ortho. You can highlight that in the middle of a command, and that can also help you get a perfectly 90 degrees or 0 degrees. Or you can, in the middle of a command, click O and enter. And that can turn it on and off as well. But if we want to just rotate this thing 90, we have it there. So we can also highlight this, and we can click on M and enter. That brings up our move. And using our snaps, like our endpoints or midpoints, we can hover around these corners, and we can create a base point where this could move. So if we want to snap it at here, and we want to bring it up to this corner, we can move that corner to the corner of our box. The nice thing is having this quad screen is right now in the top view, it's snapping to the top of my box. What if I want to snap to the bottom? I can use other viewports to help me do that. And I can just use my mouse to just come on over and snap right to it and enter. So with Gumball, it gives me these arrows and these little curves. So if I click the arrow, it's a move, so I can move it 1 foot, and it jumps up 1 foot. I can also hover over and click on this dot. When I click on this dot, I can say 1 foot, and actually it extrudes the box 1 foot. And the same with these curves, I can click that, and it can rotate the box 90. So it rotates it based off at the center of it, but instead of typing in the commands, you could always use the gumball, which is it's a pretty sweet feature. So it feels more like a SketchUp feel, but we can extrude this up 5 feet, and there it is. And we can actually cap it off. So if we want to copy something, we can type in copy. And it's going to ask us, just like the move, what point do we want to move this from? So we're going to click on this corner here. And we can specify a distance. Now the big difference between this and CAD is we actually have to click. Usually CAD, you can highlight it, copy 5 feet, and enter, and it goes. This we have to do an additional step. So if we want to move this over 2 feet, click enter, and we have to click it to confirm, and that moves 2 feet. And then if we want to move 4 feet, it references the very first one we made, and we can click it, and there it is. So if we want to say we can highlight multiple of ones. If we want to move it to the center, we can actually click on the mid, and we can highlight it to the center of this box. We also, just like with AutoCAD, we can mirror it. And it can start a plane. It's looking for a plane to mirror. So if we want to mirror on the other side, we can always reference the midpoint of this, bring it down, and there it is. We've just mirrored it. We can undo that by clicking Control-Z. We can highlight this, mirror it, and it's asking us 3-point copy X or Y. We can actually highlight copy, say, and when we click it, it'll say no, or we can by command say yes, and it will copy. If we click C, it should say no, and toggle through there. So we'll copy this. So it starts to look like that. So one thing that we have are these curves, these curves that go through the midpoint of each one of these B-reps. These are called ISO curves. We can't select them. They're just simply for our reference. But if we want to turn them off, we can go into the display. Which this side bar controls our layers, our display, our properties. We actually go into, I think I see it. We can, in my case, I don't have any of these a displays highlight. So what I can do is I can click on the gears for options, and I can add a tab, which is the display. As we see, we say surface ISO curves, turn that off, and there they go. This is also where we can start to mess around with the graphic standards on how some of the things we're looking for. So if we want to change the background, right here, it says background, solid color, and we can specify a color, which will mostly always be white. We can get that, and that's really all it is. also some of these grids, like you see that grid there, we can turn those off by in our grid and axis setting. We just turn those off, and now we can use this as a graphic standards for submitting. And to do that, just to get a simple export, we can set the view, and we use this command called view capture to file. And it comes up with a command prompt. It asks you what view you want. Since perspective is our highlighted view, perspective comes up, and it asks for a resolution. Prefer just do it in inches and just make it 150 dpi. And make it gonna make it I don't want to be too big, but honestly I'm looking at like portfolios and stuff of your guys' work in the future. It's probably best to go big, so I would keep it at 150 dpi at 32 by 2400 pixels. And we can just click OK. It asks for a path, so we're just going to do this. We'll just save this as a test. Save it. And then it says image successfully saved. And when we go to our file, do you guys see this? The file I just saved?
No.
Okay, that's what I figured. I thought that. Okay, there we go. Now, there we go. So there it is. It's saved as a simple image with a white background. We also can save it as PNG, I believe, but JPEG works just as fine. So that's a simple how we export it. We can also adjust other parameters if we want to have things that are perpendicular to faces. We can have that, so we can move things, add, reference them. Let's see, do that, and we should get a little. It'll say perp. If you guys see, move that over. So it's saying, okay, we're snapping perpendicular to this face. The same with end. You know, you will get a little tag saying end. So it helps inform us like what part we're snapping to. So snaps are really important just to get a clean model. Especially, you know, we don't want things to overlap like that. You know, we want things, you want edge to edge. That's not good modeling technique. Just make sure things line up. We can also start to cut this geometry. The great thing that Rhino is that it doesn't have to cut things that are directly attached to it. You can, its cutting software is all based off views, not actual coordinates, which is a huge advantage for, comparing to like SketchUp or AutoCAD. So if I want to draw a door here, I could simply just get a rectangle. We're going to snap it to the midpoint. We'll just draw a door at an unspecific dimension. Now in this case, it's actually on the geometry, but we're actually going to move it off to show. But if we show it in this viewport, it's off the face. But in this one, it looks like it's on it. So we can. The most common command to cut this geometry is called split, and it's asking for our object. We highlight our box, or the object that we want to split. We click enter, and then we select our cutting object, which will be this door, and we'll see it's cutting mesh, and suddenly we can highlight this surface and delete it. And so even though the curve isn't cutting, it actually cuts it all the way through, which can be pretty sweet. So it's a really powerful tool. You can also cut the geometry really easily by just drawing a simple line. And we can cut this whole thing at an angle. And it cuts it all. So we can get some pretty sweet sections pretty quickly, and it doesn't take too much stress. We can actually show. So another thing is layers. So layers is the tab right over here to the right. It's the almost like the pizza slice. The first layer that you usually always made is the default layer. But to create the layers, you simply just have to highlight new layer, click it, we'll pick a couple of them. So when we have our layers, we have layers on. We have a light bulb which can turn on and off our layers. We can lock layers, and we can change the color of layers, which is really helpful if you have a lot of geometry there happening. And there are print defaults as well. You can have them print a certain color. I don't think it's necessary for this class. We can change line types, and I don't think we're not going to be producing any materials. We also can assign materials to layers, and we won't be doing any renderings, but all those are really important for layer management and just modeling management in general. So the first thing, let's say let's rename this so it's not layer one. So if we go over here, we right click it and we say rename layer, we'll call it 0 underscore glass. And we'll change the color of this. So maybe it's a nice little color like that. So to get this object onto that layer, we can highlight it, click it, and then we can come over to the glass and we can right click it and we can say change object layer. We click it, it changes that object to that layer. So when it's on that layer, we can turn it on or off. We can also lock it, and when you lock it, I can't select it anymore. So it's a really helpful tool when when you have a lot of little pieces going around, and you're modeling some complex things. It's just nice to control that. It's also really nice that I mean, that's a lot of what the first assignment is just getting a general good modeling tactics. Just understanding some basic layering, some clean models. So if I like, these are mullions, for example, these horizontals. Actually, let's lock the glass. Let's rename this as layer called mullions.
Is there a reason for the 0 in front of?
No, there isn't. I typically do that just because organization. I like to have I like to have all my layers like have a number in front of them. So you can sort your layers by name, and I always want my like material layers on top. Later on, when we get into other stuff, when we have curves, you notice like when we make this rectangle, this curve didn't go away. It's still there, and sometimes I just don't want that curve to be there, or I just don't want to deal with it, but I still want it in the model. A lot of times I'll just make a layer called 2D curves, and I'll assign that curve to it, and I'm just going to turn it off. And it's like I still want it in the model, but I just don't want to see it right now. So, and then when it comes down to, okay, I have a whole bunch of layers, I want to keep things organized, I can just click on the name and all the materials will go up on top. I can also create sublayers with that too. So if I have, yeah, let's get our curves, and I want to create a sublayer. I can say door. Here's my door curve that I just made. That's actually our trim surface. I think I might delete it. But if I had, so yeah, how about I draw a new one. There, we're just going to rename this window. Window. This layer is, so when you have sub layers, I can turn this on and off individually, but I can also turn off the parent layer, and it turns that off as well. So it's just another level of organization. When we get into further assignments, when we get more into complex models, I think these become really helpful. When I do this at work, I get a drawing from a consultant, like a topography model that has all these line works of topography, and I'm creating a surface off that. I don't want all those line works. I just want the surface. So a lot of times I'll just create a new layer, and it'll say like, you know, consultant, or just line. Sometimes I'll just do old. And then I can put everything on that line work, or I can grab all these layers that are affiliated with all these line works. I can just drag and drop it, and it creates a subfolder. So then I can just be like, okay, I don't want to see all my consultants' work. I just want to see my own. I can just turn that off, and it turns all their 50 layers off. So again, it's just the little things that help keep the model organized and clean. There's also, if you have a lot of layers that are being unused, like if we have a lot of layers that are just kind of eating up space, we can just say purge. And it's going to purge this whole file. It's pretty much just going to do a big audit, and it's just like, it's going to purge all these, it's going to purge layers, line types, and all these materials that we're not going to be using. And you say yes, and it gets rid of everything that doesn't have anything on it. So that it's just some nice cleaning techniques for the model. If we want to, we notice if we want to join some of these, like if we have this rectangle, let's draw a quick rectangle here. Notice sometimes it doesn't quite snap all the way. actually extrude it down -1 foot. It's difficult. I don't have my mouse with me, so I'm doing everything on this. Extrude it. We're going to extrude it. Notice once we have a selection toggle. So if we have something that is too close together, it will sometimes ask us, okay, which one are you really talking about? Yeah, so this is our selection toggle. So when you're hovering over it, it's like, well, did you mean your poly surface, which would be our glass, or our little extrusion? And then you can click that, and it will highlight that. Gosh. Let's say if we have these things together and we want to join them all together as just one single object, there's a command called Boolean union. So what we can do is we can highlight these and we can type in Boolean union. What that does is it takes all the faces and it joins them all together. You notice that, redo that. We'll turn off, we'll hide all this stuff. We'll hide the glass. So we're going to go into our ghost view. So we notice that right now these are all separate individual pieces. So there's a face here. There's two faces touching each other. We do this. And we want this to be one object. So we want this thing to be hollow in the inside. So the Boolean union asked us to select all these different poly surfaces, and we click enter, and it carves out everything, so it's just one piece. And we know that. So let's say we explode this thing. Delete some of these faces. Notice that it actually cut a profile out of this to join it. Now this is really important later on when we get into 3D printing to make things watertight and to make things hollow inside. We don't want like other shapes inside these because that can screw up our 3D print. But this is a really important tool. It also does this with we can also go beyond this with, we don't have to even use as a union, we can actually start to cut shapes and define shapes. We can actually start this, like, actually let's make a cube really quick. So all of these on the side here are also great tools that if you, instead of doing a rectangle and extrude, we can just create a simple box. And notice when we highlight it with our gumball on, we don't have any of the extrude on there because because now this is actually a closed, what we call a closed extrusion. So there's nothing for it to really grab. Now we can grab some of the edges and kind of push and pull that, but there's certain elements that we won't be able to edit unless we explode it and becomes a B-rep. Now BREPs are boundary defined surfaces. They're pretty much a surface that instead of being defined by curves, they're defined by a simple boundary. To generate a surface, I can show that next. That's through a series of lofts, and that creates a surface. But a simple Boolean difference, we can take this box and we'll just make a sphere out of a sphere. We're going to snap to this end. We're just going to do that. So just like how we unioned everything and it was able to cut away and make it hollow, we're able to do that as well with this if we do a Boolean difference. So we select the surface that we want to subtract. So we'll select our box, we'll click enter, and then we select the surface that we want to subtract. And it cuts this box based off that sphere. And we can start to define that form through there. We can also do the intersection. Instead of saying, I don't want this piece, I want the piece that's in the sphere, the box that's in the sphere, I can use a Boolean intersection. Like this, enter, like that, and it gives us that piece inside. So again, it's really good. It's really nice for just simple modeling, modeling techniques, and also like later on, it's going to be really helpful for 3D printing as well, because there's definitely there's big differences in to modify this geometry using a split or a Boolean command. Boolean, yeah, you get some nice cleaner shapes. Split, you can get a lot of nasty little scraps. There is some cleanup when you do split. So it just depends on exactly what you're doing. One's not better than the other, but it's all based on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to cut a section out of this or cut an angle like I did before, I would definitely use a split instead of a Boolean, because Boolean would probably take a little longer. Also, all these have to be closed. So that's a key thing, is Boolean really only works when things are a closed surface or a closed extrusion. Split works no matter what. And also with Boolean, they have to be touching the geometry. Split, I don't have to really touch anything. I can just draw things from any plane and it can cut it. So if I want to cut like a zigzag here, and oops. Even though this is way down, and I'm actually going to move it up, and I'll also start to deform some of these curves. So I can start to deform some of these curves, and even though they're all over the place here, they are in plan view, they're perfectly straight. So I can still split and cut the shape at the zigzag. So usually split is like the go-to when we're dealing with a lot of 3D printing and things that have to be watertight. which I'll explain what watertight is later. That's really important to have. So also, some of the other simple 2D curve options. Let's draw another rectangle. Is a offset. Offset is again just it's just a very simple referencing AutoCAD. Again, you know, the funny thing about Rhino is Rhino was a plugin for AutoCAD when it first was made. So a lot of the commands from Rhino are directly ripped off from AutoCAD. So if you're having an issue on, okay, I want to do this thing, I just don't know how to use what the command is, just think of an AutoCAD command. It's pretty much the same. A lot of times too is like the commands are pretty self-explanatory. It's like I just want, you know, want this thing to be offset. You know, it's really just offset. They're pretty self-explanatory, a lot of them. And there are a lot of commands in Rhino, so they're very flexible and generous on some of the stuff. So there's some things that I'm shocked that they even have a command for. But if we want to offset this 5 feet, zoom out for a second. And there's our offset, and we can actually start to, if we wanted to create a surface out of that, we actually use this command called loft, and loft generates a surface through curves. So we can actually select this, select that. Let me change the background too, because it's getting a little, it actually generates a surface of those curves, which is going to be really useful for this assignment and also down the road. So we wanted to create really some really interesting forms. We'll be using a control point curve, or it's just a simple curve. This is when we are starting to get into nerve modeling, where we can, where it's a curve that's defined by points. And we actually start to, let's create another one. And we're gonna create another one. Okay, this is a big one. This one here, this one there. So we have these very, very different profiles, but we want to create a surface that's based off that. So just use a loft command, and when you do the loft command, it's asking for curves. Now it's really important on the order of curves that you select. So if we select these, we want to generate a surface starting from this surface to this surface, or this curve to this curve to this curve. We can click enter, and it gives us a loft option, which gives us a different ways that we can generate the surface. Right now it's just doing it simple normal, but we can make things a little tighter. We can do a straight section. We can do something that's uniform. All these are different options. We can also rebuild it, which then it's controlled through control points, or refit it, which I believe now makes it more of a B rep. But if we did it, typically it's typically it's highlighted here as control points. So there's our surface that's pretty organic. We can also start to modify this surface by doing points on. Points on highlights the surface's control points. The control points, so what we did, to take a step back, was when we generate this, we, in that loft options, back to that, we defined it that this surface was going to be rebuilt by a 10 by 10 grid. And from that grid, we can start to manipulate. So we can start to manipulate that surface through that. So this whole thing is based off these control points. And this is what nerd modeling is. And this is where I highly recommend some of the reading for this, because this gets into what exactly the logic is and the nitty gritty of what the control points are really doing. But in short, these control points can control the surface, and we can manipulate these control points to change the surface around. And we can actually change it so it's no longer following those curves anymore. And we can create some pretty organic shapes out of it. So this is where Rhino really shines, is when you have a lot of these, when you want to create these organic shapes that simply SketchUp or AutoCAD can't create. And we can actually start to shift this to the side, and so you can create some pretty amazing stuff out of this. Like I said, we can also create a pretty unique shapes out of this and cap this off. So we can even take some of this curve, and we can extrude this down. We can actually start to create this thing. Create a little box for it if we needed to. But yeah, it's a pretty sweet program to start getting into. So I'm excited that we can start diving into it. The first assignment, we won't be getting into a whole lot of these loft surfaces. We'll mostly be diving into the split, the extrude, rotate, and move, and getting into the layers. When in the assignment, when I talked a lot about like materials and stuff, and it's breaking the model up by material, I'm not talking about this material. I'm just talking about the physical materials of the building. So and all I'm really looking for is shapes that are highlighted, or shapes that are just broken down into the layers. So if, for example, if this was the glass box, this thing should be on glass, and the mullions should be on the mullion layer. There's also, if you have metal panel, put it on the metal panel layer. Stuff like that. That's really what I'm looking for. So, and it's as simple as, just having, if our glass, we can split this, we'll make a new layer. Oops. Yeah, sometimes you copy object to layer. That's a great command if you don't want to, if you want multiple things for the object, like copy it on different layers. But so really, it's just change object to layer, and that switches it to our metal panel layer. And then we can turn it on and off. One other thing to keep the model clean, let's just say I have a lot of curves right now that are just kind of gumming up this model. So what I can do is I can type in selection filter. This brings up a command prompt that asks me, what do I really want to select? So right now, everything's checked. That means I can select all those different things. So I can select points, curves, surfaces, poly surfaces, all that. Well, I just want to select the curves, and I want to put them on my 2D curve layer. Actually, I want to put them on the window layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck it all. And then I can hover over, and it's going to select only my curves. And then I can assign it to my window layer. I can right click, change object layer, and I can turn it off. And now it just helps clean up the model. I'm not dealing with a lot of other stuff with it. And when I exit out of the selection command prompt, everything goes back to normal. So I can go back to selecting my poly surfaces or my surface. So it's just another great tool to help keep things organized. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? We have a few minutes left, but should bring up the assignment again. Well, a lot of this is just from just simple extrusions and just lock, copy, offset, rotate. Actually, I think a lot of this stuff you probably just reference from the drawings. Let me see if I can't. Oops. Export to. I'm just going to export this really quick. So we can also drop JPEGs in this file. So what I just quickly did was just made a export our assignment as a JPEG. I believe you can also do this as PDF as well. But in this case, we can assignments. Okay, so here's all our JPEGs. Actually, just drag and drop on here. It's going to ask for a picture wallpaper. We'll just say it's a picture. And it's going to ask us for a first corner. And you notice when we do it, it brings it right in. And we can highlight that. Actually, delete that one. We're going to grab this one. Picture. Here it is. And actually, and for this one, we're just going to make it a new layer. Sometimes when you make a layer, and you actually have the sub layer activated, it drops down here and you're like, no, I want this to be up. There's a little arrow, this little caret, you just say move up. Oh, my bad. You can move it up, or you can actually hit the red caret. It'll move it out of the parent. So that's like the parent, that's the child. That's another terminology they use it for sublayering. But if you just select the red caret, move up one parent, it kicks it out. So it's it's not dependent on that one layer. But we can highlight this, say, image. Now that we have this image here, we actually can start to scale this thing. So, for example, if I have this line here, and line, draw this. We'll do scale. It's going to ask for a base. We're going to select this, and it's going to ask for a reference point or a scale factor. We don't really know the scale factor for this, so we're going to grab a reference point, and we're going to click this, and now it can scale this way. Since we know this dimension is 54 feet, we can just say 54 feet, and it scales that dimension as 54 feet. So you could actually start to trace over this if you want. It's another way we can do it. So yeah, then you can actually start to do the rectangle and go over this. But just make sure you reference some of the dimensions on this, and then you can start to switch to perspective view. And we can start to reference this. Bring this down. So it's 338. We'll grab that, click on that ball, and we'll say 338, and extrudes it up. And then we can start to cap it, and then we can start just working our way around the building. The nice thing about this building is it's so symmetrical. It's really, once you have one side, you can actually highlight one whole half and mirror it, and you're done with the other. So it's a pretty easy symmetrical building. It's just watch the guide, watch the dimensions of it. So, and then we can always then assign this to his, and then we also change colors, so we'll make it like, yeah, so we can make it like a dark brown or something, or a dark gray. So, but that's pretty much what I have in store today. If there's anything else, let me know. Let's see if I can. But yeah, any questions? Guys ready for this? So we'll jump into Rhino. So next week we'll just dive a little deeper into Rhino and into NURB modeling and how we can do some more complex forms. We're just kind of messing around some very simple geometry that we can do in a lot of other programs. But in Rhino, we'll get into the actual NURB modeling and how to create some pretty wild shapes. Yeah, we'll start having that. I have fun. And let me know if you have any issues with like 3D printing or getting your 3D printer set up. Like I said, just email me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Bye.